Hello, and thank you for joining us for our educational video series to discuss everything you need to know about cold caps. My name is Lindsay Nienbrink, and I am very excited to discuss this very important topic with you all, along with the help of Nancy Marshall, co-founder of the Rapunzel Project, who I will introduce shortly. First, I would like to briefly tell you a little bit about myself. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a certified oncology social worker. I have specialized in the field of oncology for over 10 years, and it is definitely my passion. Here at Jasper, I am the manager of clinical operations, and I am also a care coach. I would like to start off with discussing our agenda for today. So I will briefly go over what is Jasper with everybody. I'm going to discuss our cancer organizations and nonprofit partners. Then we will go into detail with the help of Nancy about the Rapunzel Project and what are cold caps. So to start off, what is Jasper? Jasper is a free digital oncology platform for anybody along the cancer trajectory, as well as their caregivers and their loved ones. Jasper follows a whole person approach to meet each individual where they're at on their journey. The Jasper app acts as a smart planner, and as you see on the screen with the pictures, we have personalized planners to meet your needs, where you can track your daily symptoms, your side effects, your moods. We also have a library of articles that touch on an array of different topics that can meet individual needs through different points in their journey, whether you're newly diagnosed, whether you're in treatment, or you're in survivorship, as well as for caregivers. And then we also have one-on-one live support, a chat where you can reach out if you have any product needs or you have questions about resources regarding emotional support, nutritional wellness, physical wellness, and so on. We are an extension of your traditional care, and we are here to help you along the way. So Jasper's goal is to improve the lives of all people living with and affected by cancer by providing purposeful and individualized support. And it is important for us at Jasper to have partnerships with other organizations who have this same passion. As you can see here, this is why to date, Jasper has over 60 nonprofit organizations nationwide that we have linked arms with to become successful in providing the most meaningful support for our members. And as you can see on the screen, the Rapunzel Project is one of these wonderful organizations. So today, I am delighted to have the opportunity to make you more aware of the wonderful resources and services that the Rapunzel Project offers. And I would like for you to meet our speaker. I am very excited to introduce Nancy Marshall, the co-founder of the Rapunzel Project, who will be joining me to discuss cold caps and the wonderful work that the Rapunzel Project does. So Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. Can you briefly just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and then go into how the Rapunzel Project came about?
It'd be my pleasure. Hello, Lindsay, and thank you so much for having us. The Rapunzel Project, at the end of the day, our primary mission from the beginning of our existence has been awareness. And so the opportunity to create this webinar with you and have it as a resource for your patients going forward is thrilling truly thrilling for us. I am a cancer survivor. I am the third in my mother's family to have had breast cancer. I was very fortunate to have mine found very early. And after at least a considerable amount of anxiety, learned that I did not have to have chemo or radiation, but the alternative was I had to have the big surgery. So that was a period of considerable trauma in my life that I'm happy to have moved beyond. 3 years later, one of my closest friends, Shirley, was also diagnosed with breast cancer. And in her case, chemo and radiation were indicated. She was talking to someone in the medical community in Minneapolis where we lived and learned that a patient that this doctor knew of had used some strange funky caps and somehow or other saved her hair during chemotherapy. And Shirley, being a very inquisitive person, did some research, went back to her oncologist and said, have you ever heard of these? And he said, vaguely, I doubt they work, but I have no issue if you want to try them, which in 2009 was a remarkably open-minded approach, as we later learned. But long story short, Shirley interviewed a bunch of patients around the country who had used the caps, decided there was no reason not to try it. And when we walked into the clinic for her third TCH, I think, chemo, and her hair was still all the way down her back, we had a receiving line at the infusion center of nurses and aides who were waiting to see Shirley with no hair because they thought we were crazy. We were not crazy. Shirley saved her hair. And the two of us decided that there was something wrong, that no one knew about this in the United States. And I mean, the nurses truly thought we were nuts. This trio, this committee of women that were coming to all of Shirley's chemo treatments and putting these weird caps on her head, because if it worked, they would know about it, the doctors would know about it, everyone would know about it, and no one knew about it. So the Rapunzel Project was born, and the mission from the beginning was to create awareness that the opportunity to save your hair exists and works for most patients. That's, at that time, Shirley used the only caps that existed. They were manual caps and called cold cap therapy. And you see on the screen scalp cooling therapy, because the machines which have been developed subsequently have gone under the moniker of scalp cooling, because literally that's what they do. They cool your scalp. But the Rapunzel Project was born because we thought patients needed to know that this option existed so they could make the choice that was best for them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank goodness, you know, that you made a beautiful thing out of something that was very difficult, but now you can bring awareness, because I think even, you know, this was 2009 and we're in 2023, and I don't think many people really understand this. So it's so important. And I'm so glad that we are going to educate people and talk about this. Now, you mentioned, which I would like to really quickly discuss before we get into it. I think some people get confused because it is referred to as cold cap, scalp cooling, cold cap therapy. Can you just help explain, is there a difference, or do they all mean the same thing?
They are essentially all the same process. So manual caps, which are the original caps and have actually been around since the 90s in Europe.
We have a picture of that here, right?
Perfect. Those are the caps that are on the left. They are different manufacturers have several different versions of them, but in all cases, they are caps that are filled with gel, and they either Velcro around your head to fit your head, or they go on like a helmet, and then you might use a Velcro strap to make it snugger. But the concept of these caps is that the gel is extremely cold. So with a cap like the penguin cap on the left, those caps go into a cooler of dry ice, or if your clinic happens to have it, a biomedical freezer, which is colder than a regular freezer. And they are cooled to a specified temperature, and then they are put on your head. And you do this about 45 minutes before your infusion starts, and you use a couple of caps to get your scalp quite cold. Then the infusion starts, you cap throughout the infusion, and for some period of time afterwards, which with the manual caps is typically 4 or 5 hours. The concept behind the machine caps is similar. The therapeutic effect is the same, but somebody said, well, with manual caps, they warm up.
You have to switch them out, right?
Right, the body temperature warms them up, the air temperature warms them up. So manual caps have to be switched every 20 to 30 minutes for a fresh and frigidly cold cap, which is not pleasant. It's,
right.
You know, it's something a lot of people are willing to put up with, but it's not a fun experience. The concept behind the machine caps was, and is, if you put a machine cap on, they hook it up to, the cap is full of tubing. The tubing is hooked to a hose that goes to a compressor, as you can see in the pictures on the right.
I just lost it all.
It'll come back. It'll come back. And the compressor circulates the cold fluid through the lines and through the cap. So once the cap gets down to a cold temperature, the machine can keep it at a constant temperature. Therefore, it never has to get quite as cold as the manual caps because it's not going to warm up over the course of 20 or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. So the machine caps are much more user-friendly. You don't have to keep switching them out. You don't need a cooler of dry ice.
Right.
You don't need a biomedical freezer, and you don't need
labor
a helper.
intensive. Yeah, you don't have to do all that labor intensive stuff.
Right.
So
the
really
manual
good.
caps, you really have to have a helper.
Yeah, that's really good to point out. So you can, I guess, say cold cap therapy or scalp cooling, and everyone's going to understand it means the same thing. So I'm glad
the process
that
is the same, and the difference would be if people are specifically saying cold caps, they are the caps that you have to individually put on, take off, and
that's the difference. Got it.
Right.
Okay. Thank you
and
for
the scalp
clarifying
cooling is the machine that cools your scalp.
that. Okay, but it's all cold cap therapy.
That is
Got
correct.
it.
And it would have been so much easier for us if they kept it one term, but they didn't.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. So before we go into more detail, I just want to express that while scalp cooling, also known as cold cap therapy, has been around for a while and has been making strides in recent years, cold caps might not be suitable for everybody. So it is very important that we bring awareness to this, we educate people about their options, and that patients need to discuss this with their oncologist if they're interested in using a cold cap or scalp cooling therapy to see if it's a good fit and suitable for them and their situation, as everybody's journey is different, their medication is different, their diagnosis is different. So it is very important to have this conversation with your medical team before you start treatment, which we will get into, because it is essential to begin treatment with the cold cap system. So I just want to point that out before we go into some more detail. Sorry, as I said, this is going to be a little bit wonky, my system. So Nancy, if you could, since you explained, thank you so much for the difference. Can you go into a little detail about what are the steps? So say somebody has heard about cold caps, but they're not sure how to do it because maybe their cancer center didn't tell them. What are some of the steps they would need to take to start using the cold cap? Can you explain that a little bit?
So the first thing, as Lindsay referenced, is you must talk to your doctor. It's essential. Basically, all solid tumor patients can cap, and only lymphoma patients can cap out of the blood cancer disease group. So leukemia patients, multiple myeloma patients, generally most blood cancer patients are not eligible for capping because it's circulatory in nature and there's more risk associated with it. Solid tumor patients can almost always use cold caps or scalp cooling.
Even brain tumors?
Yes, absolutely. It has nothing, the brain and the scalp have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Okay, there's a brain-blood barrier.
To talk to your doctor just in case. Yeah,
that is correct. That is correct. But it's absolutely the risk level doesn't change in the slightest. It wouldn't, if your brain was on your feet, it wouldn't make any difference. It's literally that unrelated. So, which was news to me because I'm not a medical person. So you talk to your doctor. If your clinic has scalp cooling machines and they are your preference, normally the process is fairly simple. Your clinic has a brand of machine from a particular manufacturer. You contact that manufacturer. You can go to their website. They publish, some clinics hand out literature. And from that manufacturer, you purchase a capping kit, which is your personal cap and a few other things that you might need for combing your hair down or whatever. You make your appointments for using the scalp cooling machines at the clinic with the infusion center because that's who has the machines. You normally would practice fitting that cap at home and getting a good fit to your head because you want it to touch all parts of your scalp. And then you show up for your appointment and the infusion center nursing team will normally help you make sure the fit is good, hook the cap up to the machine, set the machine appropriately, and off you go. You don't need a helper. You don't need anyone to accompany you. And it's, as I say, it's a very user-friendly process. If you want to use the manual caps, there are a number of manufacturers who provide them. We list all of the ones that we have vetted on our website. You can obviously just Google, cold caps as well, cold caps for chemotherapy. But there are a couple of providers we've never really communicated with, and there's a provider that we don't recommend for a couple of specific reasons. So we encourage people to contact us. We're thrilled to send or read our website. We're thrilled to send you a personalized letter with a lot of information relevant to your location and your diagnosis. And that way you're working with providers that we have vetted, that we know have an extremely good reputation with both clinics and patients. But you contact that provider, you make rental arrangements with them to rent the caps for the period of time that you will need them. Some of them require shipping fees, some of them require, I think they all require a refundable deposit just to make sure they get their caps back when you're done with treatment. And then they will ship them to you normally overnight. If you're a machine cap patient, you just need to get your capping kit. If you're a manual cap patient, you need to get your caps. In both cases, even the day before chemo starts is soon enough. With manual caps, you're going to run to your nearest Walmart and fill a cooler that they provide. They come with you. The cooler comes with your caps. They fill a cooler with dry ice, put the caps on dry ice, and they will be ready for use the next morning. So the day before is fine. The only thing is with manual caps, you are capping with your own personal helper, friend, family member, or even a paid helper, but you are not, the nurses cannot help you.
So you do need somebody to assist you with the manual versus the other one.
Some brave patients during COVID capped themselves, but it is not for the faint-hearted, and I would not recommend it.
Yeah,
it's
they're
very
hooked
hard
up and they're on a lot of medications. A lot of times Benadryl makes them sleepy, so it's hard.
And it's incredibly cold. So it's just hard to do it yourself and get a good fit on the cap and do it quickly. And cap changes have to be boom, 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 because you don't want anything warming up. So you rent your manual caps. We strongly recommend that everyone practice using their caps before the day before chemo. They don't even have to be frozen. You just need to understand, is it a helmet? Does it go on with Velcro? Are there flaps you have to attach? Because the critical thing about all the caps, machine or manual, is they have to fit your scalp well, or you're going to have areas that are going to be bald spots, because if there's not contact with the scalp, the cap's not treating the scalp.
It's all about the cold hitting the scalp. And then in that process, you know, obviously we are not medical professionals, just wanted to state that. But have you found that it's important, you know, you maybe wash your hair the night before and not use any hair products, don't dye your hair throughout? Have you found any of that people have mentioned has helped? Or
the caps all come with instructions, and basically most patients who are capping are washing their hair no more than once a week, which might sound gross.
Actually, that's recommended for healthy hair. They say wash once a week if you can.
I didn't know that. A lot of patients will, you know, listen, this is not a fun process. Nothing about cancer is a fun process, and this is not a fun process either. The issue is, you know, is it worth it to you to go through this process to try to get through treatment and walk away looking more like yourself than you otherwise would? And there are patients who are going to say absolutely, and there are patients who are going to say it's not for me.
Right, it's individual, because some people, and that's what's so great about it is, you know, I think, and you mentioned a lot of it on the website. Your website's very thorough, by the way, so I highly recommend everybody checking it out. But you know, it does. Cancer, like you said, it's not a great experience, and your life changes overnight and you lose all the control that you had. So this kind of gives a little bit of control back to somebody who feels in an uncontrollable situation. Now, there are people who really just hair is not important to them, and that's great. But for some people, their biggest thing is their hair, and that's okay. And it's so wonderful that they have this resource that can help them with something that's so important to them during this time.
And I think it is about whether or not your hair is important to you, but it's in an indirect way, because, you know, when we started out, we you know, Shirley, I think initially, you know, said that the thing that struck her the most about it was that she got to retain her identity, and that when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a stranger. Yeah. And that really resonated with me. I didn't have to go through chemo, as it turned out. And so I hadn't really thought it through at the same level that she was thinking it through.
Mhm.
But you mentioned empowerment, control. It's a time in your life when you have so little control because you're basically doing whatever each doctor is telling you in
Right.
turn, and you kind of feel something like a ping pong ball on a good day. This is something patients tell us over and over again. I could do something to help myself. I
Right.
could do something that to make me feel more like myself. There are other patients who can't handle cold or who just don't want another layer of complexity to their treatment. And that is totally understandable. So it's a very individualized choice.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point to make, and that it's okay if you want to do it, or even, I encourage everyone, just look into it because you don't know. Some people, it seems maybe like it's too much work, I think, and they don't realize it's not that much work. So that's why awareness is important, going to the website, doing your research. It can be overwhelming, everything you're being told in the beginning, but that's where you can like designate one of your friends to look into it for you. It sounds like you had a great friend, and you were a great friend to help Shirley, right? Help her with it as well. So, reach out to your support system. So that's a good
We
point.
get so many emails from friends and family members of newly diagnosed patients saying, how can my mother do this? How can my best friend do this? And it's so touching because you already know that there's the beginnings of the village that's going to help this patient get through this diagnosis and this process.
Right. Absolutely. I have just some questions that I think are common that I would like to point out. So I know, I've worked in an oncology outpatient clinic for 7 years, and I'm familiar with the cold caps, and a lot of the questions we would get, I think it would be important to point out, like, people are worried, does it make your whole body feel cold? Like, should you come with like mittens, like extra blankets? The infusion suites are already cold. Is this going to take it to another level? Is it going to be completely uncomfortable?
Yes. The answer is yes to all of the above.
Okay.
The manual caps are extremely cold. The only good thing about them is they are so cold that within 5 or 10 minutes of putting them on your head, you are numb. Okay, so literally we were playing cards. We were playing fish and war and all. I mean, we were playing card games between Shirley's cap changes because she was like, I just got to do something to pass the time because you're there a long time, and it was shocking how comfortable she was in the intervals between changes. But I won't lie, the first 5 or 10 minutes of every manual cap are supremely cold. We recommend Lamaze breathing for people who have had that experience. Any kind of disassociation, picture yourself on a beach somewhere, but yes, come with your fleece vest, come with your slippers, get a heated blanket from the clinic if they have one. We had patients bringing electric blankets.
That's a good idea.
If the clinical allow you to plug it in, go for it. It's cold. I think the machines are probably not as cold, but it's still continuous cold. They just don't start as cold, and you don't get that new jolt of cold every cap change because there are no caps. Right. But I mean, what I can say about this process in general is if saving your hair is a priority, and if you are willing for however many chemo days you have, which commonly maybe 4 or 6 treatments, some people have weekly Taxol, then it's 12, which is a lot more. But if you are willing to have that many unpleasant days, the chances of walking away with enough hair not to need a wig are, depending on the system you use and the drugs you have, somewhere between 60 and 100%. Okay, so to break it down a little bit in terms of results, manual caps are generally successful at a higher rate, and that is probably because patients can wear them for more hours after the infusion. The chemo centers using the machines need to get the next patient into the chair. So most patients using the machines have a pre-period of 30 minutes or so, a 2-hour infusion, and 90 minutes to 2 hours beyond the infusion where they're still allowed to sit there and cap. And the purpose of that time after the infusion is that the drugs are in your body. Your body has to metabolize the drugs and start to dilute them. The drugs stay in your body for days, but the strongest drugs become weaker and weaker with every passing hour as your body processes them. So if you wear the caps for 2 hours post-infusion, your body has done some of the work. But if you can wear them for 4 or 5 hours post-infusion, they are weaker and your body has done more of the metabolizing and diluting. It would appear that in most cases, the longer post-infusion capping is beneficial for more hair retention. So there are, like most things in life, there are choices to make. Do you want the less cold system that doesn't require a helper, that is more comfortable and more user-friendly, but you might not save as much hair? Or do you want the colder and harder system, but you are going to be able to control your outcome probably and get a better outcome? And everybody has an opinion about this. And I think it's great that they have both options. And while we're talking about that, I want to mention there is a new option coming that I think might be ultimately a great answer for a lot of us. There's a portable machine. One has actually been FDA cleared. Another one is pending clearance. They're not in distribution yet, but they function like a machine where you don't have to change caps and it's continuous once you get it on and hooked up. But they are portable, so the patient, when she's done with her infusion, can wheel herself down the hall and out to the parking lot.
Oh, so you're not stuck with this big machine in the chemo room, but that's like down the road, but they're working on it and they're making improvements. So it's great to hear that they're putting the time into this.
Right. One is approved, actually. They're just trying to figure out their distribution network. But so that's an option that's coming. I think that's going to be a good option for patients, but it is, at the end of the day, they are all really cold. And you have to really want to do this or it might not be for you.
Right. And I think you kind of touched on it. We mentioned that they're cold, but a common question I would get, so it is uncomfortable the first 10 minutes or maybe a little bit longer. And you talked about the deep breathing, but does it actually like hurt or is it more of just like an uncomfortable feeling?
Mostly what you hear is ice cream headache.
Okay.
Ice cream headache is probably the worst I've ever heard in terms of hurt, but it is, I mean, you can't mince words. It's miserably cold. And the machines are probably, I don't think you hear people use the word miserably cold with the machines because they get colder gradually. So they go down gradually and then they just stay there. Where the manual caps, when they go on your head, are, at some 20, 30 degrees below zero and then warm up a little bit. So you are getting blasted with cold. Right. You are getting blasted with cold. Shirley's comment was, if I can have 6 bad days and walk away looking like myself, just do whatever you have to do to me.
Right.
That was her attitude about it. And she had a TCH regimen. She had 6 chemos 3 weeks apart, and she saved 95% of her hair with the manual caps. And that was just unbelievable.
Right. And that was quite a few years ago. So there's been many advancements since then. So that's really wonderful. And I know you and I discussed, and I think it's really important to talk about what people need to understand about the safety of the cold caps. If you could maybe touch on that.
Absolutely. So the caps work because the extreme cold, what's the word I want, constricts the blood vessels leading to the hair follicles, and also slows down the metabolic activity of all the cells in the scalp. So while the chemo infusion is circulating in your body, basically very little or none of it is reaching your scalp while the scalp is cold. The drugs stay in your body for days, so they do get to the scalp eventually, but not during those first few hours. That shutdown gives those hair follicles a chance to avoid the strongest doses of the medication. And that seems to be enough for most patients to save most of their hair. Obviously, not everybody gets the same level of success, but overall, most patients succeed. Anthracyclines are the hardest drugs. And those results tend to be not as good, but even anthracycline patients often save enough hair not to need a wig. And I hate it when doctors say doesn't work with AC, because it does. So it's important for patients to understand that. But in the beginning, there were a lot of questions about safety, because the question was, does the restriction of the drugs to the scalp for the first few hours allow a higher rate of cancer metastasis to the scalp? And what has been learned over the last 30 years is that primary metastases to the scalp are exceedingly rare in all cancer patients. And after a review of thousands of CAP users, the incidence of a primary metastasis to the scalp is no different. So, and I don't think anyone has formally studied the why, but the doctors that I've asked about it have said that's probably because it's rare in the first place, and the drugs are in the body for days, so it's not like the scalp doesn't get treated.
Okay.
So,
well, that's why
so
it's
the
also
net of it-
important to talk to your oncologist about this, so they can explain that
Absolutely,
from a medical perspective. Yeah.
absolutely.
And that way you can make an informed decision based on what we're discussing, what, you know, if they do their own research from your website, and then to speak to your oncologist about it, if it's, you know, to weigh the pros and the cons, the safety issues, and if it's the best decision for them. So I'm glad that you brought that up and that we discussed it. I would like to discuss, so everyone saw the pictures, and thank you so much for going into detail. Now, it's being wonky on me again, see, but working in the field, you know, when somebody has a diagnosis, there's a lot around finances, because they're, you know, paying out of pocket for co-payments, medications, deductibles. So this is a major concern, loss of income, they're unable to work. It is known that the cold caps and cooling systems can sometimes have a high out-of-pocket costs, because insurance companies typically aren't involved. But while there are financial resources available, and I would like for you to discuss that, and I know it's heavily on your website as well. Can you discuss the insurance part of it, and what that looks like for these systems and how it works?
So everyone knows our insurance system in the United States is a mess. That's probably my best summary. I could tell you about someone today sitting next to me who had a certain diagnosis and a certain plan and got covered, and the person on the other side of me with the same diagnosis and the same plan didn't get covered. Sometimes it's who you talk to on the phone. Sometimes it's the person who processes your appeal. It is extremely frustrating. There is no rhyme or reason for when insurance covers it and when it doesn't. But a lot of times if you're renting manual caps, your providers have a lot of tips, because they will know if anyone in your area got reimbursed, and with what codes and with what diagnosis and so on and so forth. But under the best of cases, insurance is spotty. There are a number of financial assistance programs available. They depend first and foremost on income. Secondly, in some cases on diagnosis. And thirdly, sometimes based on where you live. There are a few areas like Washington, D.C., Metro, Virginia, Maryland, Washington has a nonprofit specifically to help patients in that area. Southeastern Michigan has a nonprofit specifically for Southeastern Michigan. And there are one or two more like that. So we strongly encourage patients to either read our website carefully in the CAPS section all the way through to the bottom where financial aid is discussed. But we also encourage you to email us. If you email us with your location and your diagnosis, we can tell you all of the programs that might be relevant to you based on your basic criteria, and then you will have to provide income information to them to see if you qualify. Most of the programs are income at or below 300% of the federal poverty level. And a couple of them have the charts too, so you can plug your numbers in and figure out if you fit or you don't fit the profile. But there's one program for breast and ovarian cancer patients that actually helps patients with up to 600% of the federal poverty level. And that's actually, I think that's something like $160,000 income for a family of four. So that's actually a pretty healthy income level for financial assistance. So it really does depend on your diagnosis, your geography, and your income. And please email us.
Yeah, it sounds, and I know your website, you guys kind of help navigate that for them. So it's really wonderful because the process is overwhelming. So having somebody to do that work for you, but also I think it's important to also point out that ask yourself, if you're getting treatment at a major cancer center, ask the doctor, ask the social workers, ask the nurses, because sometimes they have funding that they don't necessarily announced to everybody, but they could have it. And if you ask about it, then you would know. So it's a kind of like you have to ask the questions to know, because some cancer centers have grants and funds to help with the out-of-pocket costs, because to be honest, it is a very high out-of-pocket cost that you're going to hope you're going to get reimbursed for. And some people, that's okay. Some people that can be the deciding factor. So it's really important that they do the research, go to the Rapunzel Project, ask your cancer center and see what your options are before making your final decision.
I think it's super important that you talk about that, because while it's not common at like small oncology clinics and private practices, a lot of the bigger facilities and bigger hospitals have foundations and have some funds set aside to assist patients with programs like this. And they don't advertise them broadly, because then they wouldn't have the money that they need to have to help their patients.
Right.
So do ask at your clinic. And the other piece of this, and it's in its infancy, but Medicare is making progress on assistance. It's only with the machine systems. And right now it's very new and it's very complicated. It requires the hospital to provide the cap and the machine and the treatment all to the patient, and then Medicare will reimburse the hospital. But if you, the patient, spend any money, they will not reimburse you. So we initially got very excited when we heard Medicare was finally, breaking down some barriers. And now we've kind of backtracked, because it is only working so far at a few really big institutions, but we're very hopeful going forward it's going to be much broader.
That's wonderful to hear. And I think just every year there's more advancements, there's more resources, there's more funding, and, thankful to the Rapunzel Project to bring awareness to it and to help people get the facts, the information, and the resources that is needed. So I want to thank you so much, Nancy, for, really bringing awareness to cold caps and how they can help. And if anyone would like some more information, I have up on the screen, you can go to their website, which has a plethora of information like we've discussed. I can't even speak to it all because there's so much on there. You guys are very thorough. www.rapunzelproject.org. And like Nancy stated, you could always email them, info@rapunzelproject.org, with specific questions, and they are happy to help you and help you navigate the situation. So I definitely encourage anybody interested to take them up on that offer, because it's rare to really get that individualized help. So I think it's so wonderful that you offer that in a stressful time, that you can provide that assistance for somebody navigating something so difficult. So thank you so much, Nancy. Everybody, please check out their website. Now that we're wrapping up, any last minute thoughts, Nancy, or that you would like to say before we close it out?
I just want to say it's truly thrilling for this is a labor of love. It's do this to become some big, huge organization, because we both have other occupations and things in our lives. But every time we hear from a patient that says this changed her cancer journey, it just makes it all so worthwhile. It's a diagnosis nobody ever wanted to hear. And we want, I think most of us who have come out on the other side just want everybody else to get through it in the best possible way. It's why Jasper does what they do. It's why we do what we do. So please email us if we can help you. We respond to every email same day, usually within an hour or two, because we know time is of the essence for people who are facing treatment.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Nancy, so much. That was a lot of information, useful information. Thank you, everybody. Please check out hellojasper.com for more information on our website for our monthly updates on our next educational video series. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much.
Take care.